Part 1. The field of motivation has seen an enormous increase in its knowledge base over the last decade of the 20th century and into the 21st century. This means that more resources are available to educators that provide knowledge and strategies to enhance motivation for learning. The more we understand motivation, the more it requires decision making. The purpose of this edition is the same as the first edition, to present content from the current knowledge base in motivation that offers hope and possibilities for educators, teachers, parents, coaches, and administrators, to enhance motivation for achievement. The knowledge base from research and theory was chosen to help teachers understand motivation of students and themselves and to provide the basis for strategies to foster motivation for all levels of student performance, from those deemed academically at risk to those designated as honor students. The content is based on two roles teachers have for supporting and cultivating motivation in the classroom: A. Establishing the classroom structure and instruction that provides the environment for optimal motivation, engagement, and learning, and B. Helping students develop the tools that will enable them to be self-regulated learners. New to this edition, the organization of the chapters is the same as the first edition. The literature and research were updated in all chapters. Topics and content were added to each chapter, as warranted by the literature. Reorganization occurs in each chapter to provide more coherence and to account for new findings. One strand that recurs throughout this edition is the emphasis on educational reform, standards for achievement, and high-stakes testing, as they relate to motivation. This reform emphasis presents problems and possibilities for motivation. It is introduced in Chapter 1 and addressed in other chapters when appropriate. Since the previous edition, achievement goal theory has continued to receive much research attention, especially regarding performance goals. Distinctions have been made between performance approach and performance avoidance goals. This perspective is addressed in Chapter 3. Features of the text. The text contains features to aid the understanding of concepts and the application to practice. Much of the material has been field tested in my classes over a number of years. These include the following: strategy boxes. These present guidelines and strategies for using the various concepts. Exhibit boxes. There are two types: A. Forms that teachers might use for students, for example, a form for goal setting, and B. Examples of teacher beliefs and practices and samples of student work. Reflections. These questions stimulate your thinking about motivational issues inherent in the topics, your experiences, and your beliefs. Tables and figures. These serve as aids to understanding concepts. Overview of the chapters. Chapter 1 begins with a consideration of motivation challenges and problems facing educators, followed by possibilities for addressing these problems and challenges. The challenges of reform and standards are introduced in this chapter. Central to problems and possibilities is the issue of motivational equality and inequality. This chapter concludes with a definition of motivation and the perspective for this text. Part 2 is composed of 4 chapters that focus on the social cognitive processes that influence motivation. Chapter 2 presents the cognitive theory of attribution, the reasons we believe account for our own successes and failures, and those of other people. Attributional theory helps us understand poor performance while offering possibilities for change. It deals with questions such as these: how do one's beliefs about prior success and failure affect future expectations and actions? How can teachers help students who have given up? The attributional explanation for motivation is one that teachers, parents, coaches, and counselors find especially useful. As one student who had learned about attribution in another class cautioned his classmates, "You will never look at yourself the same way again after learning about attribution." Chapter 3 explores the role of beliefs about ability as a motivational factor. Perception of ability is explained from several viewpoints. The first view is self-efficacy, which is the perceived competence about performing a specific task. The strength of our self-efficacy helps determine which tasks we undertake and which ones we persist in. A second view of ability is self-worth, a theory that explains a motive to avoid failure and protect self-worth from a perception of low ability. This perspective can help answer the question, why don't students try? A third perspective is that of achievement goal orientation. Students may approach tasks with a goal of improving their ability, proving their ability, or avoiding the perception of low ability. The concluding topic is achievement anxiety, which is especially relevant in view of current emphasis on high-stakes testing. Goal setting is the subject of Chapter 4. Goals are crucial for achievement, but they are usually given more prominence in athletics and work environments than in academic learning. This chapter deals the following questions: what are characteristics of goals that make them effective? How can goal setting be used in educational settings to improve student motivation and learning? The development and enhancement of student motivational capabilities is the subject of Chapter 5. This chapter describes the components of self-regulation that equip students with the tools for self-management. These include a vision of the future, volitional control, learning and metacognitive strategies, self-instruction, and time and resource management. New to this edition is viewing self-regulatory learning through a 4-phase cycle and a description of classroom interventions to enhance self-regulation. Part 3 is composed of 4 chapters that focus on factors that teachers can affect, which influence student motivation. Chapter 6 presents 2 related aspects of teacher motivation that are essential to optimum student motivation: teacher efficacy and teacher expectations. These concepts deal with the following questions: how do teacher expectations affect student motivation and learning? How are these expectations conveyed to students? How do teachers' beliefs about their own effectiveness affect student motivation and learning? Chapter 7 is concerned with the effect of the social context on student motivation engagement. A positive social environment fosters in students a sense of belonging and membership. This is an especially important topic in view of the diverse population of students and the problems of inequality. Social context addresses the questions: what promotes a climate for a sense of membership? What is the role of peers and cultural diversity in establishing a positive classroom climate? How much choice and control should there be for optimum classroom environment? What is the role of cooperative learning in establishing a social support system? What is the role of the teacher in building a supportive and inclusive classroom context? Chapter 8 focuses on 3 instructional practices that affect student engagement and motivation: tasks, extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, and evaluation. Task motivation is concerned with tasks and teacher practices that are more likely to engage students. This includes the types of tasks that foster students' engagement and the teacher's role, the role of interest, and task value beliefs. The current perspective on the relation between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic rewards is presented in the next section. This includes the effect of extrinsic incentives on intrinsic motivation, guidelines for using incentives effectively, and practices to enhance intrinsic motivation with its limitations. Evaluation, the final practice discussed in Chapter 8, influences student effort and engagement. It includes types of assessment and motivational implications, factors such as effort in determining grades, issues in high-stakes testing and motivation, and a description of an evaluation program to enhance motivation. Chapter 9, the concluding chapter, presents guidelines for beginning the implementation of motivation strategies. One factor is the identification of concerns about implementation. A problem-solving approach for devising a plan is presented. Finally, programs that offer possibilities for improving motivation and achievement are described. Acknowledgements. I thank the individuals who contributed their help and support. I am most appreciative of my colleagues Catherine Knight, Susan Colville Hall, Julia Beller, Steve Thompson, and Rebecca Barrett. The conversations about the understanding and application of motivation knowledge for practice were most valuable. Thanks to Kathy, Susan, Julia, and Rebecca for feedback on specific areas. I also thank my department chair, Sharon Cruz, for her support. And I appreciate the continuing production assistance from Roberta Reese. I am grateful for the assistance of Senior Editor Naomi Silverman for her encouragement and insightful suggestions. For the production of the manuscript, I thank Susan Detweiler of Tech Books. I am most appreciative to the revision survey reviewers, Peter Dinner and Joan Weinreich, and the manuscript reviewers, Frank Bejers and Alan Wigfield, for their thoughtful and helpful feedback. I thank my brother Dan for his continuing support via email and phone and for translation assistance. This edition is dedicated to teachers who have the courage to make a difference and to those who have the will to start the journey that makes a difference. Education is, at least, the endeavor to get people to do things they could not previously do, to understand things they did not previously understand, and perhaps, to become the people they did not expect to become. Socket. 1988, p. 195, Socket's statement expresses a basic premise about the role of motivation. It leads to possibilities for fostering the development of students' potential or life chances. McInerney and Van Eaton, 2001, p. X. A central theme of this book is that teachers have a primary responsibility in education to help students cultivate personal qualities of motivation that can give them resources for developing aspiration, independent learning, achieving goals, and fostering resiliency in the face of setbacks. Perhaps this responsibility is even more important in the context of the motivational problems and challenges faced in the home and in schools in the early 21st century. This chapter begins by identifying motivational challenges faced by educators, followed by the identification of motivational perspectives that offer possibilities for addressing the problems and promoting optimal motivation. Next, a general framework for the role of schools and teachers in fostering optimum motivation is described. The last part of the chapter presents an introduction to the motivation perspective for this book and an overview of the remaining chapters. Problems and challenges, achievement and motivation. Motivational challenges are described from two frameworks that are intertwined. The first perspective comes from the motivational research on the role of beliefs about effort and ability as they relate to school performance. The second perspective reflects motivational inequality as it affects academic achievement. Many of the problems within this framework are grounded in the problems facing society. From both frameworks, schools are part of the problem and can offer possibilities for solutions. Effort and Ability Framework. Hitty and Rakwitz, 2000, suggested that there are two explanations for unsatisfactory academic performance of students: effort and ability. Lack of effort is one problem that educators can address. What kind of motivational problems reflect an effort and ability framework? This framework refers to beliefs about the respective contributions of effort and ability to performance and achievement in school. How do the following examples characterize problems from an effort and ability framework? Miss Rogers' grade 3 students failed to master their math facts and believe they cannot learn math. Most students in Mr. Marshall's 11th grade honors English class focus on making an A, but think they are not smart if they have to work for the grade. Miss Sanders has been assigned the low track level for English. As she looks over her curriculum, she thinks, omit the critical thinking exercises in the text because I know this group won't be able to do that type of thinking. In the prior problems, Mr. Marshall's honors students reflect this framework when they devalue the role of effort and overvalue the role of ability in their achievement. Beliefs about ability. In 1976, Covington and Beery wrote what has become a classic description of motivation problems in the schools. The problem, from this perspective, is that one's self-worth often comes to depend on the ability to achieve competitively. Covington, 1998, p. 78. In our society, the tendency is to equate human value with accomplishment. Many school and classroom experiences then act to undermine an individual's sense of self-worth because students become convinced that ability is the primary element for achieving success and a lack of ability is the primary reason for failure. The notions about ability are comparisons to other students. In competitive situations, the fundamental motivation for many students is to protect their self-worth from the perception that they have low ability. To protect their self-worth, some students adopt failure-avoiding strategies. Two failure-avoiding strategies are setting unrealistic goals either too high or too low, and withholding effort. Both strategies provide students with reasons other than ability for not succeeding, thus protecting their self-worth. Teachers often characterize these unmotivated students as apathetic or lazy. Beliefs about effort. What is the nature of effort as a motivational problem? It is both work habits and beliefs about the relationship between effort success and failure. This view of effort, characterized by Bimbechant, 1998, as lack of persistence, a preference for easy tasks over challenging tasks, or a tendency to fall apart at the first sign of difficulty, p. 37 is detrimental to student achievement. What is a classroom like when effort is lacking? The academic work problems can be seen in the following description of Miss Foster's 9th grade class. Miss Foster says a large number of students are unmotivated. She describes this unmotivated behavior as follows: many students do not have goals, sit passively in class, turn in no homework, do not keep up with their notebooks, do not take final exams or the state-required proficiency tests seriously, and resist new approaches to learning that require the use of critical thinking skills, preferring to use worksheets as they have in the past. Cooperative learning groups are described as generally unsuccessful either because of chaos or because one person does the work. Student disengagement or lack of investment in learning in secondary schools is another perspective on effort. Newman, 1992. Behaviors indicating disengagement range from severe, for example, skipping, disruption, failure to do assignments, to behaviors that, on the surface, do not appear to be motivation problems. This latter group of students behave well, attend classes, and complete their work, but they show little pride in their work or commitment to learning. An example of disengagement is this student's comment: when you get home there's always something you can be doing with your friends besides homework, so you just do enough to get a decent grade but you don't try to get your best grade, you do just enough to finish. Newman, 1992, p. 15. Reflection. Does it surprise you that disengagement also includes students who seemingly are succeeding in school? How can you explain this? Another example of effort and ability as a motivational problem comes from a comparison of Japanese and Chinese students with US students regarding the role of effort and ability in mathematical success. Stevenson and Lee, 1990. They found that US students believed that innate ability was most important for success, whereas Japanese and Chinese students emphasized effort. Similar differences in beliefs were also found among their parents. These negative motivational patterns seen from the effort and ability framework may be fostered by school and classroom practices. One of the most prevalent is characterized as the competitive learning game, Covington, 1992, p. 130. This game refers to classroom practices that force students to compete against each other for grades and recognition. Such practices include grouping students by ability, limiting the range of accomplishments that receive rewards, and recognizing ability over effort. These topics are discussed in the chapters ahead. In 1979, Nichols asserted that motivational inequality was prevalent in the schools. By motivational inequality, Nichols meant that students who do not have optimum motivation for intellectual development are at a disadvantage compared with those who do. Students who have optimum motivation have an edge because they have adaptive attitudes and strategies, such as maintaining intrinsic interest, goal setting, and self-monitoring. There is evidence that this motivational inequality has increased rather than decreased in the years since it was first introduced. Tomlinson, 1993. Situations in which motivational inequality is dominant are captured by the following scenario constructed from Ruff's, 1988, description of the climate found in some urban schools. The demands and expectations are low and students say they are unmotivated and see no reason to attend school. Low achievement is accepted as the norm. Teachers do not assign homework because they have little expectation it will be completed. Students see few examples of success, their sense of future is bleak and does not include academic achievement in any way. Students have no basis for an alternative view of academic achievement because they rarely come in contact with anyone other than similarly low achieving students. Some students don't have anyone at home to say "I'm proud you, keep up the good work." p. 634. This description illustrates a primary problem in school achievement, the large number of students placed at risk of failing academically. The students in this risk group predominantly come from families of poverty and are in danger of failing to fulfill their physical and mental promise. Hodgkinson, 1993, Knapp and Shields, 1990. For example, the National Center for Children in Poverty, 2002, reported that 39% of American children live in or near poverty. This does not mean, however, that the economically disadvantaged children are not motivated to learn in preschool and kindergarten. Stipek and Ryan, 1997. The authors found no differences in economically advantaged and disadvantaged preschool and kindergarten children on measures of motivation such as self-confidence and expectations for success. The difference between the two groups was on measures of cognitive competence, with economically disadvantaged children scoring lower than the advantaged group. The authors warned that if low cognitive competence is not addressed, self-confidence and expectations can be expected to decline. Ability grouping. Unfortunately, in many cases the motivational problems are compounded by school climate and teaching practices that may inhibit students from reaching their potential. One of these practices is the separation of students into groups based on their ability. When ability grouping is in place, many students are not exposed to rigorous subject matter that might better prepare them for college entrance examinations and college work, and it does not prepare them for jobs. MRF, 1988. In addition, the lower ability level group is deprived of peer models of motivation strategies that would help them to achieve B. Brown, 1993. Finally, teachers are likely to have lower expectations for this group and teach them accordingly. Oakes, 1985. Cultural and ethnic diversity. Motivational inequality presents additional challenges for schools and teachers due to the increasing ethnic and cultural diversity of the school population. Nearly 40% of the public school population is composed of students from a minority culture, and this percentage is expected to increase in the future. National Center of Educational Statistics, 2000. The school where Miss Foster teaches, composed of a student population of African American, Anglo, and Hispanic cultures, is representative of the increasing diversity found in schools. The socioeconomic status, SCS, ranges from a middle and upper middle professional population to a mobile, low-income population. Why does the increasing diversity of the school population present a motivational challenge? One challenge for educators is the ethnic differences found in the level of education attainment, especially the underachievement of African American and Hispanic students. Garibaldi, 1993, Mahan, Villanueva, Hubbard, and Lentz, 1996, Singham, 1998. A consistent and disturbing finding is that African American students generally earn lower grades, drop out more often, and attain less education than do white students. Haycock, 2001, Mickelson, 1990. This happens despite the fact that until grade 4 there are no differences between the performance of African American and white students. Simmons and Grady, 1990. What motivational factors play a role in these performance differences? One factor is a discrepancy between African American students and their teachers with respect to aspirations. Teachers underestimated students' aspirations, and this in turn affected the type of education they provided to students. Garibaldi, 1993. Another problem is the absence of a challenging curriculum in many schools with predominantly low-income, minority populations. Haycock, 2001. In addition, for minority students, there is sometimes negative peer pressure against behaviors associated with school success. These are referred to as acting white or Anglo behaviors. Fordham and Ogbu, 1986, Suarez Roscoe, 1989. The climate of the school is a factor in whether these negative beliefs are present or absent. Flores Gonzalez, 1999. Because this is a multifaceted problem, it is one that must be addressed by schools, teachers, parents, and the communities. Garibaldi, 1993, Ogbu and Simons, 1998. Motivational challenges related to educational reform. During the past decade, standards-based reform has been at the forefront of efforts to improve student achievement. Gords, 2001. The emphasis is on higher academic standards, accountability, inclusion of all students, and instructional change. Support for standards is based on the belief that they can provide a focal point for raising student performance. Darling Hammond, 1997. What motivational challenges are inherent in the standards movement? School reform in most states has focused on raising standards through mandatory high-stakes tests that students must pass at various grade levels. Motivation cannot be seen in isolation from public policy about school reform. Galloway, Rogers, Armstrong, and Leo, 1998. The extensive use of high-stakes testing that many states require has motivational consequences for students and teachers, but the quality of student motivation has received little attention. Mies and Mikulski, 1997. Do the pressures on students to pass these tests increase their motivation to learn, or do some students give up in the face of failure? How does this affect teacher expectations? These questions are still largely unanswered. Batistich, Watson, Solomon, Lewis, and Shapps, 1999 asserted that a narrow focus on achievement in the standards reform is problematic because other outcomes of schooling, such as motivation to learn and commitment to education, receive less attention than achievement. Without commitment, more students are likely to drop out in this climate. Another motivational challenge for standards-based reform is related to the effort and ability problem. Resnick, 1999, warned that the dominant view in American education that aptitude is the most important aspect in learning will undermine reform efforts. Tomlinson, 1993, concluded that raising standards did not increase student effort. For standards-based reform to lead to student achievement, the traditional theories of aptitude must be broken. Resnick, 1999, and higher standards must be accompanied by higher levels of support for students. Batistich et al., 1999, Roderick and Camburn, 1999. Other reform initiatives have students working more on their own, frequently on long-term thematic topics and projects with sustained inquiry, for example, Sanger, Marks, Krajcik, and Chambers, 2000, Sizer, 1986. Although these initiatives have the potential to increase student motivation, they also present challenges because this type of learning is more complex. Students need goals and persistence to work on and complete these complex, extended projects. Finally, another part of school reform is that of inclusion, where all students are provided social and instructional opportunities in classrooms rather than in out-of-class programs. Tharp, Estrada, Dalton, and Yamauchi, 2000. Inclusion presents additional motivational challenges. Many of these students, such as students with learning disabilities, LD, have a long history of failure. A major motivational problem for these students is their belief that they cannot learn, and this is compounded by a lack of effective learning strategies. Licht, 1983. Thus, the challenge for teachers is to help students develop the motivational beliefs and learning strategies needed for success. In response to motivation problems present in schools, a teacher observed, "They weren't like this 20 years ago." This is a refrain echoed in different ways by many teachers. Teachers are saying, "I don't know how to teach or motivate today's students." The two recurring themes in the motivation problems described from these educational reform frameworks are, A. Students do not have tools like concentration, persistence, volition, goal orientation, delay of instant gratification, and strategies for acquiring and retaining new information needed to be successful, and, B. Many teachers have not acquired instructional strategies to foster positive motivation in these reform efforts. Motivation possibilities and goals. In view of the motivational challenges facing teachers, what are the possibilities for fostering positive motivation? To address the pervasive motivational inequality in schools, Nichols, 1979, described optimum motivation as one that provides the greatest degree of intellectual development and proposed that optimum student motivation is a justifiable educational goal. The importance of motivational factors in developing mental abilities was also emphasized by Collier, 1994, Motivational factors determine not just the goals toward which people aspire but the way in which they seek out, process, and use information. P. 8. Motivation is an important factor in the development of children's resiliency, which is the ability to bounce back successfully despite growing up in adverse circumstances. Gordon, Badilla, Ford, and Thoresen, 1994. The following examples illustrate motivation possibilities. A comprehensive classroom management program implemented in an inner-city elementary school documented fewer discipline problems, increased student engagement, teacher and student expectations, achievement motivation, and academic self-concepts. Freiberg, Stein, and Huang, 1995. Ms. Toiliver's 8th grade math students in PS 72 have been recognized for their accomplishments. She tells students at the beginning of the year, "This is a new day and we will work from here. I do not believe in failure. Mathematics may be hard to learn, it takes dedication and hard work, but I let my students know two things from the beginning. 1. I am with them to teach, and, 2. I expect to be met halfway." Toiliver, 1993, p. 39. From day 1 in 7th grade language arts, Miss Adler establishes this expectation: if you fail, it's not because you are not smart, but because you didn't use the right strategy. Determination plus discipline plus hard work equals the way to success is the formula for success in Jaime Escalante's classes. Matthews, 1988. The possibilities reflected by these examples have a sound basis of support from the motivation knowledge base. What is optimum motivation? Optimum motivation involves personal qualities of motivation and a classroom environment that supports and cultivates it. A central theme in current motivation theories and research is the focus on developing self-regulated learners. Students who have self-regulation use both motivation and learning strategies. Zimmerman, 1994. These self-regulatory processes include intrinsic values, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. Zimmerman, 2000. Self-regulated learners also have what is known as volition, or the ability to maintain concentration in the face of obstacles. Corno, 1993. These learners want to learn, do things to make learning happen, and direct their own educational experience. Learners with these characteristics are more likely to continue to learn on their own. A similar view of optimum motivation is a will to learn. Covington, 1992, 1998, Covington and Berry, 1976. Students with a will to learn are characterized as believing in themselves and in their ability to think for themselves. They also develop a sense of personal effectiveness and the belief that they cause their own achievements. C. Ames, 1992, described motivation from the perspective of a classroom structure that promotes optimum motivation. Features of a classroom that foster optimum motivation are as follows: A. Tasks that are meaningful with reasonable challenge. B. Opportunity to participate in decision-making and develop responsibility, and, C. An evaluation system that recognizes progress and mastery of content. In these classrooms, student motivation to learn was described by Brophy, 1983, as not only more than simply doing enough to meet requirements but purposefully engaging in academic tasks by attempting to acquire the knowledge or skill involved in them. Similarly, Newman, 1992, contended that student engagement in academic work is critical to school success. Student engagement in academic work is defined as psychological investment in an effort directed toward learning, understanding, or mastering the knowledge, skills, or crafts that academic work is intended to promote. Newman, Wehaj, and Lambourne, 1992, p. 12. Marks, 2000, concluded that engagement is important in school experience because of its logical relationship to achievement and to optimal human development, p. 155. Do reform efforts such as standards offer possibilities for motivation and learning? Yes, according to Diaz, 2001, standards make it possible for the teacher, whether K-12 or higher education, to embrace the responsibility for developing learners, p. 24. The teacher guides students to internalize standards as goals, thus creating a climate for more involvement by all learners. Resnick, 1999, described such a school climate as effort-based schools in which academic rigor and a thinking curriculum permeate the school district for every student, p. 39. Although the motivation problems seem overwhelming and optimum motivation may seem like an elusive goal, the good news is that there is now a substantial knowledge base from motivation research and theory that will enable teachers to actively facilitate the motivation of students and establish a positive motivational classroom environment. The schools and teachers' roles. What roles do schools and teachers play in addressing these problems and in developing student motivation to learn? As Darling Hammond, 1997, contended, to achieve the level of learning proposed by standard-based reform, an understanding of motivation is critical. A primary assertion in this text is that motivation has to be explicitly addressed as part of instruction and socialization rather than treated as a byproduct. This premise has been expressed in various ways. One example is Socrates, 1988, contention that teaching qualities of personal capability, such as effort, perseverance, concentration, self-restraint, and punctuality, is a role of the school. Stated in another way, the task for schools is to foster a will to learn and the teacher's role is to encourage both confidence and high achievement in their students. Covington and Berry, 1976, p. 5. The conditions for acquiring self-regulated learning and volition can be fostered in schools. Corno, 1993, Pintrich, 1995. Thus, teachers and schools have a specific responsibility to assist students in becoming self-regulated learners. Brophy and Kerr, 1986, maintained that teachers should be able to develop student motivation to learn by socializing students' beliefs, attitudes, and expectations concerning academic activities and by instructing their students in information processing and problem-solving strategies. Newman, 1992, saw the teacher's role as one of engaging students in the hard work of school, the continuous cycle of studying, producing, correcting mistakes, and starting over again. Like the following example: I like to work hard and I guess I'll just pound it into myself if I don't understand. If I don't understand something, I make sure that I work at it until I do understand, and I keep it up and I never give up. I'm not a quitter at all. Newman et al. 1992, p. 14. What types of motivational knowledge do teachers and schools need to address these problems and foster optimum motivation? 2 standards-based movements to strengthen the teaching profession include a motivation component in the teacher's role. According to the Interstate New Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium, 1992, the teacher recognizes factors and situations that are likely to promote or diminish intrinsic motivation and knows how to help students become self-motivated. p. 20. The National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, 1990, stated that teachers understand how to motivate students to learn and how to maintain their interest, confidence, In face of temporary failure, pages 13 to 14. Teachers are concerned with their students' self-concepts, with their motivation, with the effects of learning on peer relationships, and with the development of character, aspiration, and civic virtues. p. 19. For teachers to fulfill their motivational roles, they need competencies in process skills and to be proactive decision makers. Kemper, 1985. This means that teachers must actively plan for motivation, not just react to motivation problems as they occur. With these process skills, teachers can diagnose the need for motivation strategies, determine the effectiveness of strategies, and fine-tune or revise strategies. Consider the following incident. A parent was in a teacher education program where she learned about the motivation strategies of goal setting and attributional feedback, which will be described in chapters 2 and 4. Her 6th grade son indicated a desire to improve his reading grade, and his mother said she would assist him. She had him set goals and provided him with feedback about his accomplishments. His grades began to improve. When the son was given his interim report, he saw that his grade was lower than he expected and was very discouraged. The parent talked with the teacher, who explained that he had given lower grades than students were actually making on all interim reports. The teacher reasoned that students slacked off the last weeks of school and the lower grade would motivate them to work harder. After the parent explained that this had actually undermined the strategy she had been using with her son, the student was given his correct average. On his final report card, he had 5 A's and 1 B, his best of the year. This incident illustrates several points about understanding motivation and choosing strategies for enhancing motivation. The motivation knowledge base has not been widely disseminated in forms that provide teachers with the basis for effective strategy decision making. Thus, we might assume that the teacher was unaware of other potential strategies for maintaining motivation. The motivational dynamics of success and failure must be understood, especially students' reactions to them. For example, the teacher had a misconception about how failure may affect student motivation. Some strategies are more powerful than others. Powerful strategies are likely to be more complex or involve combinations of motivational variables that increase the strength of a strategy, as in the prior incident in which the parent combined goal setting and attributional feedback. In this example, one strategy appeared to facilitate motivation, whereas the other appeared to undermine it. The knowledge base of motivation is so extensive that the crucial factor is making the best choice for a particular problem. If we have not learned the extensive motivational knowledge base, then our choices are limited. Chapter 9 presents a problem-solving model that will assist you in making decisions to enhance motivation for both yourself and your classroom. Motivation perspectives for classroom learning. The criterion for the selection of theory and research included in this text is to identify concepts that provide teachers with the most powerful tools for activation and persistence of their students' motivation. Tool in this sense means something that is used to perform an operation or that is necessary in the practice of a skill or vocation. As such, motivational tools may take 2 forms: A. Conceptual understanding, for example, understand why a student may not try, or, B. The use of things, for example, an appropriate incentive. As you read this text, begin building a motivational toolbox, Figure 1.1, that will provide you with strategies to establish a classroom climate that supports optimal motivation and addresses the motivational problems. A form for this is provided in each chapter. The goal of this text is to make the knowledge applicable and actionable. R. G. Rees and Sean, 1974. Applicable knowledge describes what motivation concepts are relevant, whereas actionable knowledge shows how to implement motivation strategies in everyday practice. This means that learning a theory and learning a skill should not be viewed as distinct activities. Instead, knowledge must be integrated with action. For example, when taught the theory of learned helplessness, a teacher learns to A. Explain this concept, B. Identify students displaying indications of helplessness, and C. Select and devise strategies to help the student begin making adaptive responses to failure. The remainder of this section defines motivation and presents the perspective that reflects the content and organization of this text. Conversation is replete with terms that imply motivation, both from motivational theories and our everyday language. Sam tries so hard, Sarah took responsibility for her actions, and there is no incentive for doing a good job at my work illustrate three such motivational terms. However, what is motivation? Through the years, motivation has frequently been described as having three psychological functions. Ford, 1992, A. Energizing or activating behavior, what gets students engaged in or turned off toward learning. For example, Mr. Crawford's math students look forward to the new problem to solve each week. B. Directing behavior, why one course of action is chosen over another. For example, Maria does her homework before playing Nintendo. And C. Regulating persistence of behavior, why students persist toward goals. For example, Eddie continues to run cross-country even though he does not have a scholarship. These three functions can be explained differently by various motivation perspectives. The motivation knowledge base that addresses these functions has greatly expanded from grand formal theories, for example, achievement motivation and social learning, to a broad spectrum of motivational topics. Weiner, 1990. One current theory, self-determination, is based on psychological needs for autonomy, relatedness, and competence. Deci and Ryan, 1985. A unifying theme of most of the recent approaches is a focus on beliefs and cognitive and emotional variables that influence achievement striving. Bandura, 1997, Graham and Weiner, 1996, Stipek, 1996, Weiner, 1990. These cognitive and emotional variables are composed of self-focused thoughts such as beliefs about one's competence. These approaches include causal attributions, assessing our reasons for success and failure, self-efficacy, beliefs about how competent we are to perform a task, learned helplessness, a feeling and belief about the hopelessness in a situation, thoughts about goals, the extent to which we view a goal as a learning experience or as a reflection of ability, self-worth, a concern with maintaining the perception that we are competent, and intrinsic motivation, a need to feel competent, having both strategies and skills. The emphasis on the role of cognitions and self in motivation is accompanied by a recognition of the importance of the social nature of motivation in schools. Weiner, 1990, as well as the role of the environment. Bandura, 1986. The approach that captures these areas and forms a central core of motivation for teaching and learning is known as social cognitive theory. This framework increasingly provides research that can assist teachers in the complexities of establishing a climate that promotes motivation and helps students develop adaptive motivation strategies. Social cognitive approach to motivation. Social cognitive theory assumes there is an interrelation between an individual's cognitive processes and the social environment. Bandura, 1997, Pinterich and Schraben, 1992. This perspective of motivation interrelates the factors, a. Cognition personal, such as beliefs about ability and emotions, b. Environmental, such as incentives and evaluation criteria used by the teacher, c. And the behavior or performance of the person, such as increasing effort after a low grade, Bandura, 1986, Dweck and Leggett, 1988. These three factors interact through a process that Bandura, 1986, termed reciprocal interaction, in which each component affects the other two. They may not be of equal strength. These components are shown in Figure 1.2. A student's cognitive process, such as belief about his or her ability, acts as an important mediator of motivation, which influences both expectations for future performance and action taken. This is a complex, continuous interaction, but an example can make it easier to understand. The interactions of the three factors are shown in Exhibit 1.1 in the example of Martin and Marty, who are both taking math. The two students had similar beliefs about their ability to learn math but experienced contrasting instructional environments. Their behaviors or actions were influenced by their beliefs and environmental factors. These factors, in turn, influence each student's subsequent beliefs about his or her ability in math and the actions he or she will take. The focus of this text is predominantly drawn from the social cognitive theory. The content of the chapters demonstrate the reciprocal influence of these factors: cognition, environment, and behavior. This motivational framework is the basis for self-regulation. Other motivational theories such as intrinsic motivation are linked to these social cognitive processes as relevant to classroom motivation. Chapters 2 through 5 focus on the cognitive processes that influence motivation. Chapters 6 through 8 concentrate on classroom factors that affect motivation. The triarchic view offers teachers a range of possibilities for enhancing motivation for achievement because it considers what the student and the teacher bring to the class and the environmental aspects that can be influenced by the teacher. Factors that affect and guide behavior. This includes concepts such as causal attributions, expectancy for success, and their interrelations. Because of the overrepresentation of minority students in special education and low-track classes, motivational approaches for culturally diverse groups must be especially sensitive to dynamics of failure or how individuals feel, think, and act in response to non-attainment of goals. These factors reflect a social cognitive perspective. In contrast, early motivation research was predominantly concerned with determining differences among ethnic groups, an approach that often led to misconceptions about the motivation of African American students. Graham, 1994. Motivation for culturally diverse populations is more than comparing differences among different groups. An important aspect is to identify the motivational qualities that are neutral across cultures, are valued by those cultures, and that recognize individual differences. Socket, 1988. Tharp, 1989, observed that some motivational factors such as motivation for accomplishment, reward, and recognition receive relatively consistent support from parents and the community across cultures. Research, McInerney, Roche, McInerney, and Marsh, 1997, found that motivational profiles of Western culture and non-Western indigenous students were more similar than different. Therefore, research on cultural perspectives on motivation will be integrated throughout this text as the topic indicates. As you work your way through this text, you will come to understand the extreme complexities of initiating and maintaining a motivating classroom. The synthesis of research presented here provides a sturdy foundation of motivation building blocks to allow you to begin making informed decisions concerning the most effective motivation strategies. Review of major points. 1. Educators are faced with motivational problems and challenges. One set of challenges stems from the effort and ability problem, in which the focus on ability to the exclusion of effort leads some students to adopt strategies, such as not trying, to avoid the perception of failure. 2. Motivational challenges from the inequality framework include the number of students at risk of failing academically and the increasing diversity of the school population, with the underachievement of African American and Hispanic students. These challenges are compounded by ability grouping. 3. Other challenges are presented by school reform movements such as the standards and high-stakes testing and inclusive school efforts. 4. Optimum student motivation is a justifiable educational goal because the motivation knowledge base provides many possibilities for addressing problems and challenges. One role of teachers and schools is to develop self-regulated learners and incorporate motivation and learning strategies. 5. Motivation is often described as having three functions: A. Energizing or activating behavior, B. Directing behavior, and C. Regulating persistence of behavior. Current motivational topics focus around self-focused thoughts. Social cognitive theory, which assumes a reciprocal relationship among an individual's cognitive and emotional processes, environmental and social factors, and the behavior or performance of the person, is the primary basis for this text. Similarly, the interrelationship of these factors is more appropriate for working with culturally diverse populations than previous comparative approaches. Thanks for listening. We will continue tomorrow.